The paper trembles in Colonel Take-Kai Nogai's hands. Not from fear, from something worse. From the slow, creeping realization that everything, every assumption, every briefing, every certainty drilled into him at the Imperial War College is catastrophically wrong. It is August 17th, 1942. Guadalcanal. The document before him is an intercepted United States Marine Corps training manual. He has spent the last 3 hours reading it, rereading it, checking the translation again and again, certain his interpreter has made some fundamental error. The interpreter has not erred. They trained them for 6 months. Nogai says aloud to the empty command bunker. His voice sounds hollow. 6 months of individual combat training before they even join their units. He sets the manual down, picks up the combat report from yesterday's engagement, reads a passage he has already memorized. Enemy forces demonstrated coordinated fire and movement at squad level. Flanking maneuvers executed with precision uncommon in previous encounters with American Army forces. Night infiltration attempts met with immediate, organized response. Estimate enemy casualties at 4. Our casualties, 4 to 7. The numbers do not lie, but they make no sense. These are not the soft, individualistic Americans from the intelligence briefings. These are not the undisciplined soldiers the superiors promised would break under banzai charges. These are something else entirely. If this story moves you, please hit that like button and subscribe. These assessments from Japanese military archives deserve to be remembered because they reveal a truth that Hollywood never told you. Take-Kai Nogai is not a fanatic. He is a professional, 41 years old, graduate of the Imperial War College, class of 1927. He has fought in China, studied German military doctrine, read Clausewitz in the original German. He believes in evidence, in careful analysis, in the systematic evaluation of enemy capabilities that separates competent officers from dead ones. This is why the manual in his hands terrifies him. The Imperial General Staff has told him what to expect. American soldiers are individualists, poor at coordinated action. They rely on material superiority. They lack fighting spirit. They will fold under pressure, under night attacks, under the spiritual superiority of Japanese forces. The manual describes something different, something methodical, something that sounds less like military training and more like the creation of a machine. Every Marine rifleman trains as a scout, as a grenadier, as a bayonet fighter. They practice small unit tactics until movements become instinctive. They drill night operations until darkness becomes an advantage rather than confusion. They learn to coordinate with artillery, with armor, with air support, combined arms warfare not as theory but as reflex. Nogai has read German assessments of Soviet forces, Japanese analyses of Chinese troops, British evaluations of Italian capabilities. Professional militaries evaluate enemies professionally. This is not propaganda. This is the cold arithmetic of war. The American Marines, according to every document crossing his desk, do not fight like the Americans in the intelligence briefings. They fight like Germans. No, they fight like something he has never encountered. German combined arms doctrine with American industrial firepower with something else. Something about initiative at the lowest levels. Sergeants making decisions that Japanese doctrine reserves for captains. Corporals calling in artillery strikes. Individual Marines adapting tactics mid-battle without waiting for orders. It should be chaos. The intelligence briefings say it will be chaos. The combat reports say something else. Nogai thinks about yesterday. The night attack is Colonel ordered, textbook Japanese tactics, proven in China, refined through years of combat. Strike at night. Use spiritual superiority. Break the enemy's will. His men had moved through the jungle in perfect silence. 4 to 7 of the best soldiers in the 17th Army. They had infiltrated to within 50 meters of the American lines before anyone noticed. Then, light, not searchlights, something else. Flares fired immediately, multiple positions, coordinated. As if the Americans had been waiting, as if they had known. The Marines had not panicked, had not fired wildly into darkness. They had responded with immediate, organized violence. Automatic weapons fire from prepared positions. Grenades at exact intervals. No confusion. No hesitation. Like they had practiced this exact scenario. Like they practice it every night. 4 to 7 men, 4 dead Americans, 4 to 7 dead or wounded Japanese. Nagai looks at the training manual again, finds a section on night operations, reads, "Night defensive drills will be conducted no less than twice weekly. Marines will practice immediate response to infiltration from all directions. Emphasis on noise discipline and coordinated illumination. Twice weekly, for 6 months, before they ever see combat." He thinks about his own men. Good soldiers, brave soldiers, men who train for 3 months, weeks of basic drill, some tactical instruction, spiritual education. Then to China where they learn from experience. From survival, the Americans are learning before experience. They are arriving with skills his veterans take years to develop. This is not the intelligence briefing. This is not what Tokyo promised. He writes in his report, "Enemy Marine forces demonstrate tactical proficiency exceeding previous encounters with American Army divisions. Recommend immediate revision of assault tactics. Current doctrine insufficient against this level of enemy preparedness." He does not write what he is thinking. We may have underestimated the wrong enemy. Lieutenant General Harukichi Hayakutake reads Nagai's report with growing unease. It is September 3rd, 1942. Similar reports are arriving from multiple sector commanders. The pattern is undeniable. The Americans on Guadalcanal are not what Tokyo described. Hayakutake has fought the Chinese for 5 years. He knows combat. He knows how men break. He knows the difference between well-equipped troops and well-trained ones. These Marines are well-trained. His intelligence officer, Major Kuramoto, has compiled statistics. The numbers tell a story that contradicts everything. In 23 separate engagements, Japanese forces averaging 2-to-1 numerical advantage. Result, Japanese casualties 4.3 times American casualties. Not because of firepower disparity. Chinese nationalist forces often had superior firepower and still broke. Because of something else. They do not break, Kuramoto says simply, even when surrounded, even at night, even when we achieve surprise. They form defensive perimeters immediately. They maintain fire discipline. They wait for our attack to exhaust itself, then counterattack with reserves. Reserves. The word catches Hayakutake's attention. They always hold back reserves, Kuramoto continues. At every level. Squad leaders hold back men. Platoon commanders hold back squads. Even when pressed, they do not commit everything. They wait for our charge, absorb it, then strike with fresh forces at the moment of our exhaustion. This is German doctrine. This is Prussian military theory. This is not what individualistic Americans should be doing. Hayakutake requests combat footage, watches American Marines moving through jungle, notes things his officers missed. The intervals between men, exactly consistent, exactly correct for mutual support. The hand signals, simple, clear, instantly understood. The fire and movement, one element always shooting while another advances, never both exposed simultaneously. These are not tactics learned in combat. These are tactics drilled until they become automatic. He writes to General Headquarters, Marines are not equivalent to previously encountered American forces. Their small unit cohesion and tactical flexibility require doctrinal response. Frontal assault tactics proving costly. Recommend infiltration and siege approach. His recommendation is ignored. Tokyo believes in spirit over tactics. Tokyo believes the Americans will fold under pressure. Tokyo has not fought these particular Americans. Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki stands on the concrete roof of his command bunker and does mathematics. It is November 19th, 1943. Tarawa Atoll, Bishio Island. He has 4,500 men. 2 years to prepare. He has built fortifications that German engineers called impressive. He has artillery, machine guns and interlocking fields of fire, beach obstacles, minefields, every advantage terrain and engineering can provide. He calculates that he can hold for perhaps 10 days against an American assault, perhaps 2 weeks if his men fight with proper spirit. He is wrong. He will be dead in 7 to 6 hours. But standing here now, watching American ships gather on the horizon, he is confident, not because he underestimates the enemy, because he has done something most Japanese commanders have not done. He has studied them. His intelligence file on United States Marines is 300 pages long. Combat reports from Guadalcanal, from Tulagi, from a dozen smaller engagements. He has read them all, taken notes, drawn conclusions. The Marines are predictable, not in tactics, in temperament. They are aggressive. They attack frontally when frontal attacks are tactically sound. They use overwhelming firepower rather than clever maneuver. They are methodical. This last word, methodical, is what gives Shibasaki hope, because methodical means they can be planned for. German forces were methodical, and Japanese forces learned to fight them in China through Chinese-German-trained divisions. Soviet forces were methodical, and Japanese forces learned their patterns at Nummenhan. Methodical enemies are dangerous, but they are knowable. Shibasaki's defensive plan exploits this. He has studied Marine assault doctrine. Their training emphasizes aggressive movement from the sea, rapid advance inland, immediate establishment of beachhead. They will not stop, will not hesitate, will push forward even under fire because that is what their training demands. So Shibasaki has prepared a killing zone. Not at the beach, they expect that. 50 meters inland, where the Marines will have pushed through the beach obstacles, will believe they are advancing successfully, will be committed to forward movement. That is where his machine guns are sighted. That is where his mortars are ranged. That is where his men will fire not at the beach but at the assault's second wave, when Marines are caught between water and inland defenses. It is a good plan. It will kill many Marines. It will not be enough, because Shibasaki has made one crucial error. He has studied Marine doctrine. He has analyzed Marine tactics. He has calculated Marine firepower. He has not understood Marine training. The Marines hit Bishio at 0913 hours. Shibasaki watches from his bunker through a periscope. The assault develops exactly as predicted. Landing craft approach. Marines wade through chest-deep water. The tide is wrong. The reef exposed, everything favoring the defenders. Machine gun fire cuts into them. Men fall. The water turns red. The Marines do not stop. Shibasaki has seen brave men, has fought in China where courage was common. But this is different. This is not courage overcoming fear. This is training overcoming casualty. The Americans reach the seawall, begin moving inland, enter his killing zone. His machine guns open fire. The results are devastating. Marines fall in groups. The advance should stop here, should break, should seek cover and wait for support. The Marines do not stop. They do something Shibasaki did not predict. Individual squads, without orders, without officers in many cases, begin immediate flanking maneuvers, not retreating, not freezing, moving laterally under fire, finding dead zones in his overlapping fields, using their own smoke, their own suppression, moving like they have practiced this exact situation, because they have, hundreds of times, on training ranges in California, until flanking under fire became not a desperate measure, but standard procedure. Shibasaki watches his killing zone, his perfect, prepared, mathematically sound killing zone, gets systematically dismantled, not by courage, by technique, by small groups of men executing complex tactics under conditions that should render complex tactics impossible. A Marine squad reaches one of his machine gun bunkers. Shibasaki watches the approach. Fire and movement. Grenades through the firing slit. Flamethrower into the entrance. Demolition charge on the roof. The bunker is neutralized in 4 to 5 seconds. This is not what his calculations showed. This is not what happened in China, where brave Chinese soldiers charged bunkers and died heroically, and eventually weight of numbers prevailed. This is something else. This is violence applied with technical precision. He revises his estimate. Not 10 days, perhaps 72 hours. He is still optimistic. Major General Tadamichi Kuribayashi sits in his office in Tokyo and reads reports with professional interest. It is February 1944. He has been assigned to defend Iwo Jima, an assignment that is, he knows, a death sentence. But before he dies, he intends to understand his enemy. The reports before him describe fighting in the Philippines and New Guinea. American Army divisions. Kuribayashi reads with attention, takes notes, compares. The Americans have 2 types of ground forces. This much is clear from the reports. Marines and Army. The distinction matters. From New Guinea, 3rd Battalion Commanders report, American Army forces demonstrated initial confusion under night assault. Defense collapsed after 30 minutes. Enemy retreated in disorder. Our casualties, 21. Enemy casualties, estimated 173. Enemy equipment abandoned on field. From Guadalcanal, different battalion, same month, American Marine forces responded immediately to night assault. Coordinated defensive fire within 2 minutes. Counterattack with fresh reserves within 15 minutes. Unable to penetrate defensive perimeter. Our casualties, 9-6. Enemy casualties, estimated 17. Kuribayashi sets a report side by side. Studies them. The difference is not firepower. Both American forces had similar equipment. The difference is not courage. Both forces fought. The difference is training. Response. Tactical flexibility. The Army divisions are learning in combat. The Marines arrived with knowledge. He finds more reports. Philippines campaign. Army divisions improving rapidly. Experience teaching what training should have. But the learning curve is steep. Early battles costly. Japanese forces able to achieve local successes against Army units that would have been impossible against Marines. Kuribayashi is not encouraged by this. The Army divisions are learning quickly. American industrial capacity means they can sustain the learning curve. Marines provide the immediate effectiveness. Army provides the mass. Together, they are formidable. He writes in his private journal, the Marines are the point of the spear. The Army divisions are the shaft. Both necessary. Both dangerous. But the Marines are the primary threat because they arrive prepared. Kuribayashi arrives at Iwo Jima in June 1944. He has 8 months to prepare. 21,000 men. He intends to use them efficiently. His defensive plan is based entirely on understanding his enemy, not the American enemy in general, the Marine enemy specifically. He has studied every Marine assault. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Tinian. He has identified patterns. Doctrine. Response protocols. He knows how Marines fight because Marines fight the same way every time, because that is their training. They assault aggressively. They use overwhelming firepower. They combine arms effectively. They adapt tactics, but within doctrinal parameters. They are predictable not because they are inflexible, but because their training creates consistency. Kuribayashi's plan exploits this consistency. No bonsai charges. Marines have learned to expect and counter these. No beach defenses. Marines have trained for beach defenses since Tarawa. No obvious strong points. Marines excel at reducing strong points. Instead, defense in depth. Tunnels, hidden positions. No counterattacks. Pure defense. Let the Marines advance, then kill them from concealment. Let their aggression become liability. Let their training for frontal assault meet an enemy with no front. It is brilliant. It will cost 11,000 Marine casualties, the most in any Pacific battle. Kuribayashi will be proven right. The best way to fight Marines is to not fight like the training manuals say you will fight. But he writes something else in his final letter to Imperial Headquarters. Something that shows he understands more than tactics. The American Marines are the finest amphibious assault force in human history. They have transformed warfare. Our defensive innovations here at Iwo Jima are not defeating them. They are merely making their victory more expensive. There is a difference. He burns the letter before sending it. Tokyo does not want dishonesty. The truth that Kuribayashi could not write is documented in Japanese military archives. Systematic, undeniable, uncomfortable. Post-war, when Japanese military historians can speak freely, they compile the complete assessment. Colonel Issei Fujiwara, formerly of the General Staff, writes in his 1952 Analysis American Ground Forces, a comparative study. Marine divisions and Army divisions represented fundamentally different military philosophies. Marines were special-purpose forces, smaller, more intensively trained, doctrinally unified. Army divisions were general-purpose forces, larger, more varied in training quality, doctrinally flexible. Against Japanese forces, this difference manifested consistently. Fujiwara's research is meticulous. He examines casualty rates, mission success rates, tactical adaptation speed, Combat effectiveness under varied conditions. The numbers are stark. Marine divisions in initial contact with Japanese forces. Casualty exchange ratio averaging 1 Marine killed for every 4.7 Japanese killed. Army divisions in initial contact with Japanese forces. Casualty exchange ratio averaging 1 American soldier killed for every 2.1 Japanese killed. Not because Army soldiers were less brave. Not because their equipment was inferior. Because their training was different. Because institutional culture was different. Because the missions they trained for were different. Army divisions were training to fight in Europe, to face German forces, to conduct large-scale mechanized warfare across open terrain. They were retrained for Pacific jungle warfare in minimal time. They learned effectively, but they learned in combat, not before combat. Marines had been training for Pacific warfare since the 1920s, since the development of amphibious assault doctrine. Every Marine rifleman trained for jungle warfare, for night combat, for coordinated small unit action under adverse conditions. They arrived knowing what Army divisions had to learn. Fujiwara notes the convergence. By late 1944, Army divisions were performing at near Marine levels. Experience closed the training gap. But those first months, those early battles, the difference was undeniable to anyone reading Japanese combat reports objectively. And there is something else in the Japanese assessments. Something uncomfortable for modern American audiences. Something Hollywood will never show. The Marines were more aggressive. This is stated repeatedly. More willing to attack fortified positions. More likely to pursue defeated Japanese forces. Less likely to accept stalemate. This sounds like praise. The Japanese officers do not mean it as praise. Lieutenant Yasuji Kaneko, Tinian Garrison, writes in his final report, Marine forces demonstrate aggression beyond tactical necessity. They assault positions that could be bypassed. They pursue with forces that could be preserved. They accept casualties to maintain offensive momentum. This is their doctrine. This is their training. This makes them predictable. This also makes them unstoppable. The aggression costs lives. American lives. The Japanese assessments note this clinically. Marines take more casualties than necessary because the doctrine prioritizes aggressive action. Army divisions, without this ingrained aggressive doctrine, sometimes accept slow advances with fewer casualties. This is not cowardice in Army divisions. This is tactical pragmatism. Different training produces different decision-making. The Japanese do not view this as Army weakness. They view it as Marine ruthlessness directed inward as much as outward. Marines are willing to pay prices that make tactical sense and prices that do not. The difference is sometimes unclear until after the battle. Fujiwara writes, Marine effectiveness came at Marine cost. Army divisions learned to achieve similar results with lower friendly casualties. But this learning required time. Marines bought that time. This is the assessment Hollywood will never show. Not because it is false, because it is complex. American audiences want to believe all American forces were equally elite, that the soldiers at Normandy were equivalent to the Marines at Tarawa, that every division was equally prepared, equally trained, equally effective. The Japanese documents say something else. They say American military effectiveness was more nuanced, that institutional differences mattered, that the Marines were genuinely exceptional not because other American forces were weak, but because Marine training and doctrine created something unusual in military history, a force where institutional standards were maintained with extraordinary consistency. Major Yoshitoka Hori, Iwo Jima survivor, interviewed in 1974, we could predict how Marines would fight, not because they were inflexible, because their training was so consistent. A Marine squad on Guadalcanal fought essentially identically to a Marine squad on Iwo Jima. Same tactics, same coordination, same aggressive spirit. Army squads were more variable, some excellent, some adequate, some still learning. Marines arrived knowing. This is not disparagement of Army forces. This is recognition of what intensive, specialized training produces versus general training learning through experience. And here is what makes us uncomfortable for modern audiences. The Japanese were usually right in these assessments. When American military historians later analyzed the same battles with access to American records, the patterns matched Japanese observations. Marines did have lower casualty exchange ratios in initial contacts. Marines did demonstrate more consistent small unit effectiveness. Marines did maintain aggressive doctrine even when it increased friendly casualties. Army divisions did improve rapidly, did eventually match Marine effectiveness, did sometimes demonstrate better tactical patience. Both forces were effective. Both forces won, but they were different. The difference was visible to their enemies even when it became invisible to their own history. The Japanese assessments sit in archives now, in Japan, in the United States, available to researchers, mostly unread. Hollywood creates films where Marines and Army soldiers are interchangeable, where American forces are uniformly exceptional or uniformly struggling depending on the film's message, where institutional differences disappear into generic American GI iconography. This is not malicious. This is the nature of national memory. Nuance does not survive popular culture. Complexity does not sell movie tickets. The message becomes, all American forces were great because Americans are great. The Japanese officers would find this strange. Not the conclusion. American forces were effective. This is undeniable. But the erasure of distinction, the flattening of difference, the removal of what made the Marines specifically exceptional. Because to say Marines were exceptionally trained is not to say Army soldiers were poorly trained. To recognize institutional excellence in one force is not to diminish other forces. Military effectiveness exists on a spectrum. Different missions require different preparations. European theater, Army divisions were essential. The scale, the logistics, the type of warfare required exactly what Army divisions provided. Marines would not have been more effective in France. Would possibly have been less effective. Wrong force for the mission. Pacific theater, Marines were designed for exactly this warfare. Amphibious assault, island terrain, decentralized small unit action. They were not better soldiers in some abstract sense. They were better prepared for this specific environment. The Japanese understood this. Their assessments are not value judgments about American character. They are professional military analyses about institutional effectiveness in specific contexts. What happened to this nuance? Post-war, American military culture unified. The separation between services became source of rivalry rather than recognition of different purposes. To acknowledge Marines were more prepared for Pacific warfare felt like suggesting Army divisions were inferior. So the distinction vanished from popular memory. Veterans knew. The Marines who fought at Tarawa knew they trained differently than the Army soldiers at Normandy. The Army soldiers knew it too. But in post-war America, unity became more important than distinction. And something else happened. The aggressive Marine doctrine, the willingness to accept casualties for momentum, became uncomfortable in later wars. Korea, Vietnam. The cost of aggressive assault doctrine increased as American public acceptance of casualties decreased. The institutional culture that Japanese officers documented became liability rather than asset. Modern American military doctrine reflects lessons from this. From Japanese assessments. From American self-analysis. The Marines still exist as specialized amphibious force. But modern doctrine emphasizes tactical patience alongside aggressive action. Lessons learned from Japanese observations about the costs of unvarying aggression. The irony is that the Japanese were studying Americans more carefully than Americans studied themselves. Kuribayashi understood Marine doctrine better than many Marine officers. He exploited its consistency. He revealed its costs. And he did so because he was professional enough to see American forces clearly rather than through propaganda. His final letter, the one he boned, contained one more sentence. A Japanese historian found it in draft form in 1968. Kuribayashi had written, then crossed out, then written again. If Japan had trained forces with Marine consistency and American resources, the war would have ended differently. We did not. They did. This is why we are losing. He burned it because it was defeatist, because it contradicted the spirit over material propaganda, because it was truth that Tokyo could not accept. But he was right. The Japanese professional officers knew they were right. Their assessments documented it. And somewhere in that recognition, in the enemy's acknowledgement of what made one American force distinctly exceptional, there is truth that deserves remembering, not because it diminishes other forces, but because excellence deserves recognition even when that recognition comes from those who fought against it. The Marines trained for 6 months before seeing combat. They maintained institutional standards across thousands of men. They arrived prepared for the war they would fight. The Japanese noticed, documented it, died fighting it, and then history forgot what the enemy remembered.